And ladies and gentlemen, we are live. It is Monday, January 17th, 2022, the one, the only Dr. Martin Luther King
Yes,
Jr.
indeed.
Day.
Thank you,
Um,
Dr. King.
one of my favorite one of my favorite messages that I kind of heard today, of a way that if you are kind of unsure on how to really celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day if it's not something that you typically do. You don't even necessarily have to celebrate, but the message was they encouraged people to go out and talk with someone who isn't like you. Whether it is that they don't look like you, whether it is they're not from the same area that you're from, engage, conversate, make a new friend, whatever it is. The true message behind Martin Luther King Jr., as we all know, is we are all equal, we are all one, and it still seems like an uphill battle. Some days to get some people to understand that, but we are in the great year of 2022. There's not a better time to be alive, and man, what a week we have had here.
Right.
Was it Snowstorm Izzy? Is that
Yep.
the name of the blizzard that came
Yeah,
through here,
I
old
tell you
Iggy
what.
Azalea?
Now that the Weather Channel's getting bored and they have to name snowstorms just to get a rise out of themselves, and it, whatever. But
Is he coming or is he going? That's what
yeah,
I saw all week. Yeah.
yep. We ended up getting about 3 inches here at in Louisiana. They got about four down in Eolia. But yeah, you're talking about Dr. King. One of my favorite quotes from his "I Have a Dream" speech has always been, and it's
Mhm.
probably overquoted, but I still love the quote. That I dream of a day when we will be judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. And you
Mhm.
know, I, I, Dr. King, I wrote my senior research paper in college. My
Mm.
as a history minor, I wrote my senior research paper. History majors were required to write, do a research. You had to have so many, but you also had to actually interview two people who were directly
Mm.
involved with the topic. And my dad was actually in the army at the time of Little Rock 6, and his unit was on standby to go to Little Rock to make sure Eisenhower was going to send them to Little Rock to make sure that they got in. So um,
Mhm.
and so and got to interview my dad on that. Got to interview um, someone who was someone local person of color, and talked about what it was just it. Dr. King is just one of my heroes in history, and he's a champion to kind of what our cause is of hearing both sides, talking both sides, bringing people to the table. And I've loved Dr. King. So
Yeah. One of the shames is Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968.
68 because 69 we were on the
68,
move,
69.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And when I think about that, it's sad. I wish when you have polarizing figures, icons in world history, not just American history, and for America, he's definitely probably a more prominent figurehead here in the states. But because America is the globalization of what America is in the mainstream and pop culture, Martin Luther King is a figurehead across the world, and so I think I wish we would have had the the opinion of Dr. King throughout the 70s and 80s, up until
I
up
think
until
yes, it would have. I
yeah,
think that
it's
would have
it's one of those
totally
shames.
yes, because I think it really would have totally reshaped um, the way, I mean, a lot of things that had happened, you had those people who were connected to him, Jesse Jackson, that was his, and that still is his claim to fame.
Mhm.
And I think, pardon the expression, but I think he's bastardized that whole connection that he had with Dr. King, and he's used that influence to gain his own agenda. And,
Mm.
I think Dr. King would roll in his grave if he knew what was being done, in his name. But, you know, this is a day that I always think about, and that I think that that's cool. Yes, we should be, and Colby Coleman, or one of our listeners, just said yes. That's something that I did a few years ago. So yeah, we definitely encourage that and celebrating and commemorating Dr. King's birthday. So
Yeah, and so and with this, with Monday being a federal holiday and some people having the week off, I hope if you guys did take the day off, I hope you enjoyed your day. I hope you were able to spend some time with family, do some catching up on chores,
did you
whatever
get
it
the
is
day
that
off
you
today?
guys. So technically, we did have the day off in the office. I still went into work. I still had some stuff that I needed to do to catch up on. Our daughter was able to go back to daycare, and Tony had work today at the gym, so it allowed me to kind of get some stuff that I had needed to do done. That I had Thursday and Friday. I had Julian with me because she was sick, and so being able to get those things done really, really, really helped out a lot.
That's good.
So
That's good.
um, yeah, yeah, but now we're tackling the week on full force. I wish the as we speak, I still think the Arizona Cardinals are being absolutely
Yeah, I've got it.
butchered
I've actually got it going
alive,
on my TV down here in the den. It is 10:55 in the
21
third,
to 0,
21-0, which is exactly,
and it looks
yeah. What a
like
great.
the Rams are on the move to score again. Yeah, and funny thing, and we'll get into our talk, but man, what a wild card weekend! I mean,
Wasn't it awesome? Wasn't it awesome?
there was one close game. There was one close game, which
The Raiders and Bengals game, which
no, well that one. See, that wasn't even the one I was thinking because what the Bengals ended up winning by what 20 points?
no, they won by 7.
Bengals Raiders. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it did get close there, but they did
The
they?
Yeah,
I
that
thought
was
that
the
one was
one.
much
That was the
larger than
one
that.
with the inadvertent whistle that they shouldn't have counted the touchdown, where the Bengals had gotten that touchdown.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
I watched that rehashed.
Bengals.
Yeah,
I felt like I'm probably wrong. I felt like watching that game. The Bengals had the full control of that the whole time. The
yeah,
one I was
yeah,
referring
yeah.
to was the nothing makes me happier. Well,
Say it, say it.
besides a Chiefs loss than a Cowboys loss.
Yes,
And the way that game ended,
yes. Oh my gosh.
oh my gosh. So for those that either don't watch professional football or that didn't get the chance to see the ending
Oh, that
of the
was great.
Cowboys
That was
game,
so great.
it kind of came down to quite literally what could have been a last second all or nothing play to send the game into overtime.
And it was going to happen.
However,
It was going to
the
happen.
head coach or the offensive coordinator, yeah, whomever made a pretty terrible offensive call
That was.
that
Mm-hmm.
made it very difficult for the Dallas Cowboys to stop the clock, which is what they needed
Yeah, you're breaking up a little
to
bit there,
do.
Sean. You're breaking up a little bit, but yeah, what
They decided to run the ball
run the ball, not and by the way,
up
not
the
to the
middle of the
run the ball, not to the
field,
sideline.
get some
I think we're at.
extra yards to make a more manageable pass, but uh,
Why?
due to
Here's my question though, Sean.
them
Why run that down to
not
the?
giving enough time for the ref to set the ball, to get back to the line after the play, the game was over, and Dallas Cowboy fans, I feel like with Cowboy fans, it's every year it's their year, boys year. Let's see here.
You keep on. You're skipping out on me there, Sean, a little bit
You got me
there.
back?
Yeah, I've got you on
Uh,
audio, but I don't have you on video. But yeah, the thing about that was, and for those who we heard a little bit about that. What ended up happening? I mean, whoever decided to. There you go. Now you're good. whoever decided to
Right.
phone that call in, why? My question is, why run that ball to the middle of the field? Of course, I saw that the 49ers were running that basically sideline prevent defense there, where they had four linebacker pretty much just covering the
Hmm.
safeties and the linebackers or the corners covering the out of bounds. And what's they always say the standard rule is, don't give the ball when you're in a hurry up situation. Don't give the ball to your center. Give the ball to the umpire so he can touch the
Hmm.
ball, put it down. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this cannot be happening. But I mean, the Cowboys were making that drive, and I was like, oh, this is going to. And I honestly thought, I mean, as fast as they were moving that ball down the field, I thought this game's going to go to overtime.
Yeah.
And then they just, what had to have been the bonehead, like you said, the bonehead
Hmm.
play of the year. Hey, let me run, slide. And then you saw the umpire was doing his dangest to get to the ball. But
Hmm.
the center was in the way, and the center actually bumped him out of the way, and then he got around there, touched the ball, put it up, reset it, and then when he clocked the ball, it was triple zeros.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's definitely going to be one of those things where, if it wasn't the whole Dez caught it argument, and if it
Mm.
wasn't, it's just, yeah, it'll be
Well, it'd be
another
not
5 years of
listen.
Cowboys
Oh,
fans coming
listening
up
to
with excuses. So,
well, and I tell you what, hats off to to their quarter. I mean, I thought that Cowboys got back into it, finally got their heads out of their butt. But what even made me even happier, Sean, was watching Bill Belichick pout on the sidelines of the Bills. That was a straight up manhandling of
never before in NFL history since the Super Bowl era has there been
7.
a perfect game from the offense. 7 drives, 7 touchdowns, and then the
In
last drive was the one that they took the kneels in. So
and
I
they
mean,
probably could have marched it down again.
probably could have.
Yeah,
If we're being honest, they definitely probably could have. Yeah, it was
it was a
a
great.
massacre,
And
an
like I said,
absolute
it was
massacre.
you only have, so you basically only had the two games that were somewhat close, and then the rest of them were
Have been
blowouts.
blowouts,
Were
absolute
I
blowouts.
mean, I hate it. I mean, I tell you what, I've never had a ill feeling towards Ben Roethlisberger. I think he's one of the greats of the game. He represented what Pittsburgh's all about, hardcore work, and I hated to see him. What was bad about it was, though, they're going down that last drive of the game, and still his offensive line allowed him to get a sack on the last drive. I was like, come on, guys, you got to lay it all out there in the line for your man to. I thought that was. I was just. He was too good of a quarterback to go out that way.
Yeah,
I hated
he's
seeing that.
stuck in the mud now. I mean, he's old as not even, I wouldn't even call him old as dirt because that's not
He
true.
would be.
He's still a young man, but in a young man's game, it's
He came in the league. So he came in the league in
oh
2004.
4.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, 18 years. That's right, 18 years in the league.
Yeah.
18
Yeah.
years in the league, and I mean, and that's unheard of for. I mean, he came in the same time. What they say? Who all were the guys who were picked ahead of him? Eli Manning and all the guy for the Chargers. I can't think of his name right now.
Philip Rivers.
Philip Rivers, and both those guys retired. So, but
Hmm.
anyway, but the title of tonight's podcast, if you see it, we called it "Having a Bad Week, Mr. President," and this was one of those weeks. And I was just telling Sean before we went on live tonight that this could have possibly been the worst week if you were, I don't care, of any president. I've never seen anything, and I've studied history for over half my life, and I've never seen, I mean, it was like lined up like ducks in a row, and I don't like either. I didn't I'm not a Biden fan, I'm not a Trump fan, but I wouldn't wish this political roller coaster ride on anybody. When you and we'll start with this, Sean. I guess we can talk about Quinnipiac University, who does polls on everything. I mean, they do polls from, you name the topic, and they are probably one of the most next to the. I can't think of the other name of the other big pullet. But Quinnipiac is they're noted for being pretty much down the line. January. So this was January the 12th, which was last. What is today? This is the. So this was last week.
5.
Yeah, and so it said just so his polling numbers were low. He went from a 36 down to a 33. He went to a 33 approval rating, and a lot of it seems to go with everything from the from what I'm reading here from the Quinnipiac report here. Uh, Coronavirus pandemic, disagreements with his own party, stalled progress on the Build Back Better agenda, the voting rights, I forgot what the name of the Freedom to Vote Act, which is failing, and yeah, it did not look good for the president. And if I'm the president, one thing that you have to do is you need to start making because he's got a wide plate of things that are not going his way. The number one thing that we can start with and we can go with is what happened this morning. If you guys didn't see Joe Biden, they always have the Congress always has a Martin Luther King Congressional Memorial Breakfast where they all get together and they meet. And Joe Biden went down there and the president doesn't always come, but he went down there this morning to kind of throw his weight around um, to get this voting rights bill to pass. And one of the things that he's driving at, which scares even some Democrats, is that Joe is pushing for, he wants to see an end to the filibuster. So, for those of you who don't know what the filibuster is, a filibuster, this is a tactic that is used by the minority in the Senate, whoever the minority is, and it allows the minority to have a voice in the Senate. That way, the majority can't just strong arm what the majority can't strong arm all the politics that goes on. And the Senate has prided themselves on the ability to filibuster. I mean, that's one of the things that they have. In the House, you cannot stray from the topic. You're limited to, unless you can do in 1 hour of debate that has to be on the topic. And if you stray from the topic in the House, they'll sit you down. But in the Senate, you can go on and you can filibuster about anything. The longest filibuster on record was held by Strom Thurmond, who was a senator from South Carolina oddly enough, during the Civil Rights Act debate during 1967, 1968. The man went for 23 hours. When you filibuster, you have to stand by your desk. You go for, I mean, as long as you want to, you can yield the floor to somebody else and they can yield it back. You can tag team it. But he went for 23 hours. He read the entire Washington, D.C. phone book. He read a cookbook. He talked about his grandchildren. He went on and on and on for 23 hours. Now, all that to get rid to, but there's only basically two ways that you can end a filibuster. Okay, and that is the people just actually three ways, but the people finally just sit down and just shut up, or you can invoke what is called the Cloture Rule. Now, the Cloture Rule says basically 60 votes can pass over a filibuster. Okay, and what is really shooting Joe in the foot this week is that the two moderate Democrats, these are the two Democrats who are not party, what do you want to call them, party flunkies. This is Senator Joe Manchin and Senator Sinema, I believe is her name, from Arizona. I don't have her first name. Let me look here at this article. So this Kristen Sinema, so she's a Democrat from Arizona, And so she's scared to death about eliminating the filibuster. Um, let me play let me play just a little bit of this clip, and those of you who are watching can watch this. This was from this was last, because Biden's been talking about this for a couple weeks now, and he's talking about eliminating the filibuster. And let's go to, let me push play on this. We can hear it, and then I'll go to the video. So this is Christine Sinema. This is just a little bit from her speech. It's only about a 2.5, 3 minutes, but just listen to what she has to say here.
Rather than to seek to understand their views, our politics reflect and exacerbate these divisions, making it more and more difficult to find lasting, broadly supported solutions to safeguard our freedoms, keep our country safe, and expand opportunity for all our citizens. So 2 questions face us as a nation. Where does this descending spiral of division lead? And how can we stop it? Our country's divisions have now fueled efforts in several states that will make it more difficult for Americans to vote and undermine faith that all Americans should have in our elections and our democracy. These state laws have no place in a nation whose government is formed by free, fair, and open elections. We must also acknowledge a painful fact. The state laws we seek to address are symptoms of a larger, more deeply rooted problem facing our democracy. The divisions themselves, which have hardened in recent years and have combined with rampant disinformation to push too many Americans away from our basic constitutional values. In the spring of 2017, after Trump took office, I wrote an opinion piece in the Arizona Republic highlighting my concerns about the strains on our constitutional boundaries and the shrinking respect for our founding constitutional principles. In the years that followed, my colleagues and I in this body were called upon to participate in 2 separate impeachment trials for crimes against our Constitution. And on January 6th last year, I was standing in this very spot, speaking in this very chamber, defending Arizona's fair and valid election against disinformation, when violent insurrectionists halted the presidential certification. Threats to American democracy are real. I share the concerns of civil rights advocates and others I've heard from in recent months about these state laws. I strongly support those efforts to contest these laws in court and to invest significant resources into these states to better organize and stop efforts to restrict access at the ballot box. And I strongly support and will continue to vote for legislative responses to address these state laws, including the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act that the Senate is currently considering. I support these bills because they strengthen Americans' access to the ballot box, and they better ensure that Americans' votes are counted fairly. It is through elections that Americans make their voices heard, select their representatives, and guide the future of our countries and our community. These bills help treat the symptoms of the disease, but they do not fully address the disease itself. And while I continue to support these bills, I will not support separate actions that worsen the underlying disease of division infecting our country.
Uh-oh. So basically, and she would go on to say what she would, oh, here we go.
The debate over the Senate's 60 vote.
I'll just go ahead and stop it. She was going to go on to say in that clip how the debate out there about trying to eliminate the filibuster. She said, I'm going to stand for the 60 votes it takes, because that, and
threshold shines a light on our broader.
But she said we need to have the 60 votes in place. We cannot. She likened it to a disease. She went in there. She did defend party lines. She said, "Hey, I'm going to vote and we'll talk more about this Freedom to Vote Act if we have time. But this freedom to, well, we can go ahead. I'll just give you a basic of what they're talking about. The Democrats tried to pass this through. It passed through the House two different times in two different formats. And basically, what this bill would do is require certain things, just a few things. On voting access, election day would be a federal holiday, a minimum of 15 days of early voting. Um, but this is the one. Some of the things that the Republicans don't like. States would need to accept a wide range of forms of non-photographic identification in places where ID is required to vote. Counting eligible votes on provisional ballots cast in the wrong precinct. So if you voted in the wrong place, still count those votes. If you see some of the other ones, some of the more controversial, prohibits local election officials from being fired or removed without cause. Requires states to use voter verifiable paper ballots. Now, you have to understand in states like Oregon, I believe Oregon and Washington State, there's a few states that do online screen voting. And they're wanting to go back straight to, which I'm for that, going straight back to paper ballots. Stronger enforcement of campaign finance regulations, and just other issues, and and also to prevent gerrymandering, which is basically redistricting a political district to favor one political party over the other. And so there's some of these that I think that are really interesting, but when the Republicans' biggest stink is, number one, it's a state. It is, yes, it is the federal right to vote, but it's the state's rights to manage an election. And in the last two elections, there's been reports and there's been allegations of voter fraud. And I don't. What are your thoughts on this, Sean? What do you think?
Well, wasn't the like voter fraud all coming out from like some senior home or something like that? There was
That was
like,
one. That was one of them. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know, voting, like some of the issues and stuff like that, like the filibuster. I um I I don't believe in getting rid of the filibuster personally. I myself am a well-versed expert in
Yeah.
performing a masterful filibuster
Yes, you were.
in your government class.
Yes, you were.
Um, the old throwback, but no,
50
I
Shades of
mean,
Grey has never been read better in my classroom.
exactly, right, right, yeah. Ironically, one thing I remember from that was going on about how that would be the year that the Cincinnati Bengals would go to the Super Bowl, and we flash forward, and now this might finally be the year that they go. Who knows? Oh no, but I mean, you know, a lot of these things, like, and you'd almost mentioned it, where it sounded like she was going to vote in and go with her party kind of thing, which
Oh
is
yeah,
just
yeah.
a sheer be a dog and roll over. Um, and as opposed, now go against your morals, which is a shame. When we elect individuals, you would think that you'd want them to have your best input and put their best foot forward, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens, how this goes. I mean, have we seen? And I know this is a filibuster, but look at the back and forth that we've kind of had recently with Supreme Court is definitely the Democrats are
Oh, they're
up
livid.
in arms. They've been up in arms for a couple of months now with this new Supreme Court, and I mean, and we're kind of seeing why. We're seeing a lot of the things that the Supreme Court is either letting slide through or shutting down. And this big recent one is
Oh, it's
the
killing the Democrats.
mandate
Yeah.
for what was it, like large corporations
Well,
to mandate the
yeah, we
vaccine,
can
or?
talk about we can go back and forth between these. So yeah, and that was on Thursday that ruling came down on Thursday that the Supreme Court blocked Joe Biden's vaccine and testing requirement aimed at large businesses. This was and some people call this kind of a backdoor way to get it done, but basically it it was through, I believe it was through OSHA, wasn't it? It was through OSHA that said
Mm,
any business that employed more than 100, had more than 100 employees, either uh, they either had to have a weekly test, paid for, by the way, out of their own pocket,
mm,
and they had to get the the vaccine. And but it wasn't a total loss for that. I mean, they did say that healthcare workers did have to have the vaccine, but at the same time it
yeah.
said, you're not. I mean, when you think of, I don't know, construction companies, large scale construction companies, you think of assembly line factories, you think of anywhere where there are people who are, and this is a dead horse. This is a horse that we've beat to death. But you, I think we said this even last week. The people who are going to get the vaccine have gotten the vaccine, and the court recognizes that this is an overstep. You know, and there were some of these guys that I wasn't a fan of. A couple of Trump's picks for the Supreme Court. I wasn't that guy Gorsuch. That guy came across to me as kind of a tool. But Amy Barrett Cohn, was that her name? Amy Barrett was the other one that
I
he
think
nominated her.
so.
I kind
That
of
was
and
after, was she the one that was put in place after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died?
yes, and it was right before the election, and that was a big stink about that.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can go a variety of different ways when you look at the Supreme Court. And actually Quinnipiac, actually that was another one of their, they did a number of polls, and they over 70% of the people in that poll though felt that the Supreme Court's ruling is based upon politics, not legal precedents. You know, so
Mm.
even though the president's approval, I mean, people are seeing what it is, you know, but the reasoning that I heard, and to me, this is kind of a preposterous statement. It, when you ask, okay, well, then why do these people need to get vaccinated? Well, to protect Americans. Okay, so if a number of Americans have, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but if a large number of Americans are vaccinated, I don't know what the recent numbers are, but with the people who are vaccinated, who's going to be hurt by not being vaccinated? I mean, people who aren't vaccinated.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, you and I have both had the old Rona. You and I both are vaccinated. You and I are both are get the infusion, or get the take your zinc and your vitamin D, and you're within a week you'll be right as rain. And yeah, I still, I mean, I still am thankful that I got the vaccine. And there's other people who's like, well, I don't. Okay, fine, don't get the vaccine. Great. I've had a we've had a large number of kids out at school in the last couple of weeks with this latest variant. Now, granted, it's not as severe as what the other ones have, but I mean, it spreads like wildfire.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, when you have all of this stuff coming up, and between the Freedom of Voting Act, Joe Biden is just not. So I mean, so if you're an advisor, to Joe Biden, Sean, what are you going to tell him? I mean, was obviously this whole thing about the filibuster, by the way, which he defended, you know, he was a senator for 40 plus years, which he defended numerous times the right to filibuster. And then you've got the Freedom to Voter Act. You've got the highest the highest inflation rate that we've seen in almost 40 years. I mean, what are you telling the president right now?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, we know with him, it seems like a lot goes in one ear, out the other ear. Uh,
Or just doesn't get registered at all. But
yeah, I mean, and that is a huge, huge issue. Regardless, and maybe it was just because the media wanted to push Trump into, the and every headline, whether it was media that was for Trump, whether it was media that is against Trump. We are seeing a lot of media that is against Biden, and the issue is because a lot of the media that would be pushing the good doesn't have a whole lot of good to push.
there's nothing to
Um,
push.
I mean, look, I'm not just saying this because I think it's funny or I think that it's like just let's cactus jokes. Joe Biden has serious mental health issues,
Mm-hmm.
serious ones,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be the onset of Alzheimer's, dementia,
Dementia.
who knows? But it is scary to see his interactions with foreign leaders. It is scary to listen to him stumble through State of the Union addresses. I mean, we're what? Barely we're
Just a little bit over a year into his
just
presidency.
over a year in, and we've got 3 more years of this. And God only knows if we get another 4. And I want to make the record very clear. Like, I was not an individual that wanted Trump back in office either. Don't get it
Yeah,
twisted.
me neither.
Um, but
I didn't vote.
why do we have to act like Joe Biden is the answer? And to kind of, so what would I tell him? What do I tell him? Like, hey, Buster, it's time to step down and let Kamala do her best, because I have not seen or heard a word about her or from her, other than the video after they won the election, of her going, "We did it, Joe. We did it," and smiling all up by that tree wherever the heck she was. We just don't see them. We don't hear from them. And I
Well,
think that's an issue. I think that's a reason why you're seeing the approval ratings in the low 30%. Um,
and don't you think that we
you
have
know,
with the last two? So with Kamala and with Mike Pence, when I saw Joe Biden, when I saw Joe Biden and Barack Obama, I mean those guys worked together.
mhm.
You know, when I saw, I mean, some people criticized George Bush's. Oh God, why am I going blank now? Dick Cheney, but I
Dick
mean,
Cheney.
you
Yep.
know, Bush and Cheney were like two peas in a pod. Obama and Biden were
Mhm.
like two peas in a pod working together. With these last two presidents, they've been, trailblazing. We're going to go out there and do it on our own,
Yeah.
and we're going to leave the VP, go back over and sit over there at the Blair House and do your thing over at the Blair House, which is the vice president's resident. But
Mm.
go over there to the Blair House, do your thing, show up when I need you for a good photo op. Okay, okay, minority woman who helped me get elected, in my opinion, was the one who really pushed him over the top to get elected. And now, like you said, she's kind of shoved off in the corner.
Mhm.
The,
Yeah. No, it's wild. And I honestly, I don't know. Could it be to save face for her for 3 years from now?
I don't. I honestly, Sean, and you alluded to this earlier. I cannot see a full 4 years coming out of this man. I can't. I mean, just the other day, I don't know if you caught this or not, and the media kind of glazed over this. I caught it on, I think it was on my Twitter feed, and somebody had mentioned It's either my Twitter feed or my Facebook feed. It might have been my Twitter feed though. And the comment was, "Did Joe just say it was 2020?" And so I clicked on it, and it was from a speech that he had made. I want to say it was sometime last week, and he was in the Oval Office. So I mean, it wasn't before. He said, he was like, "And we look forward to this new year of 2020," and did blow. And I'm like, and he never corrected himself. Never corrected himself. I'm like, somewhere somebody's got to be saying, behind the camera, going, 2022. And but I honestly can't see this man lasting 3 more years.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll just like when you listen to him give a speech, and if he starts to stumble on one thing, then
Oh,
the whole
yeah,
speech is gone.
yeah,
And like I remember a lot of people, at the beginning where people are like, well, no, like he's got a stutter and it's like, no, it was never like this previously. Like I remember listening to Biden speak before when he was the vice president. I
yes.
remember listening to him speak.
And he was.
This is clearly just. I think that's the issue with American politics is why do we still have people that are in their 80s being
Thank you,
elected? I don't
thank
get
you.
it. Like look at some of the candidates, and again, like people like shit on guys like Mayor Pete whenever he was running, Pete Buttigieg, and
Yep.
like I really liked him as a candidate, but for some reason
Andrew
it's
Yang.
still the same saltine crackers. It's Bernie Sanders, my God, the grand wizard of all. I don't get it. I don't get the mass appeal that this arrogant moron Bernie Sanders is because he's on Twitter every day. Is because he has nothing better to do than bitch and moan on Twitter, and young people just go, "Oh my God, he's the saving grace. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread." Motherfucker's older than sliced bread. He's not the one that we need making steps moving forward. And golly, it's the same with individuals like Biden. That was why when President Obama came into office, it was for a lot of people a breath of fresh air.
Yes.
Here's a young,
49.
charismatic senator who is really. I mean, I remember his whole thing was change. And regardless of how you felt about President Obama as a president, what we can say is for 8 years, whether it was good or bad, I enjoyed listening to him speak
Yes.
because he could do it. And he was professional. Even if other nations might have thought one thing about us, at least there was a
You knew where
professionalism
yes,
about
you knew where you
sending
stood.
President um Barack Obama to those meetings. And then we had 4 years of, oh, here comes the firecracker. Here comes
Right.
here comes Trump. God only knows what he's going to say.
So I stood corrected.
And then
So
now we have a guy who half the time doesn't even know what nation he's in.
78 years old. Barack Obama was 47 years old when he was sworn into office. It makes him the fifth youngest man to take office. Quick history question: who was the youngest elected president? You remember?
Was it JFK?
It was JFK. JFK was 43 when he came into office. The youngest president we had by succession was Teddy Roosevelt at the age of 42. The average age, and I know this because I teach this all the time in government, and this number has slowly gone up. The average age of your congressman is 57 years old, which means that you have a crap ton bunch of old guys, and you've got this smattering of young guys spread out all over. Why is it, and I'm with you, why is it that we wheel out the crustiest old fart that we can when you've got brilliant, bright political minds and people can't get past a lot of issues? I mean, there's even conservative Democrats who would say, I would rather vote for the Republican than vote for a gay Democrat. Here's the thing. And, I, I don't support the homosexual agenda, but I don't condemn people for being homosexual. You know, we I think that it was silly for people to say, oh, I can't vote for him because he's gay, but he doesn't use it.
Extremely, extremely silly.
But he doesn't use. It's like he's not defining. I mean, people, and I'm not saying anything against gay people. I mean, but we know of people who build their whole character on how flamboyantly gay they are. That's not who Pete Buttigieg is. That's not who he was. That's one aspect of his life. When you look at what all the things that he did as mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and what all the things that he did, okay? Who's the young black woman right now that has got a lot of Republican, oh, she's
The news lady, Candace Owens.
Candace Owens. Candace Owens has, but a lot of people are already looking her as young. Okay, here's her three strikes: young, black, and speaks her mind. Okay, how could you? When I can see there, and I've studied this, and we actually talk about this a lot in my government classes. When you can talk about, okay, what's the benefit of having the old guy in the room? Okay, having the benefit of the old guy in the room is saying, I've got somebody here who has got the experience. I've got somebody here who's got the experience. I've got somebody here who has, if we were to look, minus the dementia, if we look at Joe and we say, okay, what do we have? What are the quality characteristics that Joe Biden has? He was a very valuable asset to Barack Obama during his presidency. He was great. He was more than great. He was fantastic at bringing both sides together in the Senate. He was, and that was one of the things that he, about healing America and bringing America together. And a lot has changed in that 4 year span from the time in 2016 to, well, technically 2017, when they left office. And he was still mourning the death of, well, I forgot which son it was that had died. He was mourning the death of his son that had died. His son had actually told him on his deathbed, Dad, I want you to run for election this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I want you to think about that too, how much that could have changed the landscape of things. If Joe Biden ran, right, the history favors the incumbent vice president when he runs after a two-term president. History favors that guy. Mm-hmm. You look all the way back through history. The last guy who didn't win off of a two-term president and run on his coattails was Richard Nixon when he was Eisenhower's VP for 2 terms. That was the last guy. I mean, when you look at these guys when they ran, Al Gore too. I'll take it back. Al Gore. But that, again, a contested election. But now, when you say, okay, so that's the benefit of having the older guy, what's the benefit of having the younger guy? Well, I think the benefits of the younger guy outweigh the benefits of the older guy, because you've got people who are actually in touch with the people. Who would you feel more comfortable? So if you had a boss, let me ask you this way, Sean. If you had a boss, if your boss was, say, 76, 75, however old Biden is, 78. You had a 78-year-old boss and you had a 43-year-old boss. Which one are you going to have an easier time connecting with?
43-year-old boss.
Why is that?
Just because, I mean, not just the generational gap, but I see it in a lot of my own work today. Now, mind you, they're in their 70s in my office, but the people that are a little bit older than my kind of direct line of bosses that are younger individuals, it's just because they've experienced kind of the streets of the job more recently. They kind of know the grit. They kind of know what it is. You look at people like Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, that have been eating out of silver spoons for so long. Like when you work politics, for so long, right? You it's the same for the Grand Wizard Bernie. You get roped into the analytics of
Mm-hmm.
things, right?
Mm-hmm.
You start viewing people, you start viewing the problems as things that are on paper. You start looking at the numbers versus, hey, this is what's really going on in the world. Because if you get reelected over and over and over and over again, that just becomes the world. And then you do it how
You have a
it's
Russian situation where you have a Vladimir Putin, who is only, and this may shock some people, Vladimir Putin is only the third elected president of Russia since the Soviet Union fell back in 1990. Let that sink in just for a second. He's changed the Constitution twice to keep himself in office. And when you keep on going with the same old guy and the same old guy and the same, you're exactly right. And one of our listeners just brought up a great point. He said sometimes it feels like Jen Psaki, who is Joe Biden's press secretary, the young redhead. He said is the only person in the current administration who has any enthusiasm or interest in moving the White House forward. And I 100% agree with that statement. I watched.
it's
Go ahead.
there's a lot of things that I don't understand, like with the technology advancements and where we're advancing, why we don't have term limits on reps. I don't get that. Why, I understand the need for experience. I understand, if the head of the floors was a tenured position, I would understand that. But we need to start rotating these career politicians, because look at it. Look where a lot of the collusion is, where the corruption is, where these people are making. Look at the money. Look at the money that these people that have been in office for 30 plus years have. Look at what their salary is, and then
Mm-hmm.
look at the actual money
Oh,
that they
all
have
your
to their
contributors and
name.
everything else, right?
It is that would think of how nice that would be if we knew the business packs, the money that would go into these hands of these reps, if there were term limits, because you can't keep feeding them. It's just
When you and that but Joe Biden is the epitome of that because
yes,
Joe Biden has been when you're a politician that's been in 40 years, and believe it or not, he's not the longest serving politician
no,
in
no, not at all.
Patrick. I believe I may be totally off on this, but Patrick Leahy, who is the Democratic senator from Vermont, was first elected as senator to Vermont in 1974, the year I was born. Okay. So he was elected in 74, 47 years. Okay. These guys get a base pay salary of I think it's up to, in the House, it's like 165. And I think in the Senate, it's like 175, 180, somewhere in there. These guys, you use that term career politician. And our founding fathers, when you look at them, by the way, our founding fathers got a stipend. They didn't have a salary, they got a stipend. They got a stipend for housing, they got a stipend for food. That was it. Stipend for housing, stipend for food. The only federally paid officials were the judges and the president. George Washington in 1789, his salary, and which was quite large, was 20. George Washington was paid 25 grand, and that's in $1789. Okay, and but now you look at the president. The president gets $400,000 a year, which you can look at that a number of different ways. But the president, he's got everything paid for: health care, housing, cars, everything. And like you said, these career politicians in the Senate, you hear stories every now and then. You'll catch some senator or some representative taking in a football game or a baseball game, and they're in a company. They don't then. I've noticed over the last 3 or 4 years they don't show it as much, but they used to say, "Oh, well, look, there's Representative so and so in the
Mhm.
box with Robert Kraft, or in the box with and if that doesn't dishearten you, it should. I don't have anything about I one thing I will say for Biden or for Obama, when Obama wasn't up in the press box. Of course, he had a detail around him. He usually was courtside for a Bulls game. He wanted to be out there with the people, you know. But when you see these guys flying private jets, when you see them, you know, taking these campaign donations, like you said, the PAC organizations, which are the basically the financial arm of these special interest groups, it's just amazing that we haven't there. Well, it's not amazing. There shouldn't be any wonder why we haven't put term limits on politicians.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary world, politics. We look at things like career politicians, and again, and part of the caveat is sometimes experience can be a good thing, so we don't run into the AOCs of politics. But I don't know. I wish one of these days it'll get to the point where we get an encrypted email on our phones. It says, "Hey,
Time to
this is the tax dollars we have. Here's the 10 different things that people want us to fix. We got enough money to fix 5. Every vote counts.
right go
Pick your
after it.
5."
Yep.
Boom, 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 boom. And the people genuinely get to pick. That'll maybe be the metaverse, kind
Yeah.
of
And Sean,
one day.
I really don't want to end on a negative note, but I do want to end on a little bit of a lighter note. And
Yeah.
talking about COVID, and I shared this with you guys this week. This was trending last week. Fox had some left or just some doctor I don't know if he has a degree from a Mexican university or whatever, but this guy made a claim that Viagra could cure COVID-19. And he claimed this woman in Britain, so she was 37, this 37-year-old woman, and this was reported in the January 2nd issue of the Sun, said the 37-year-old woman credited Viagra with opening. I don't even know what credited Viagra with opening up her airways after she was hospitalized and placed into medically into. It opened up something. But the folks at strangely enough, the folks at Pfizer, who are also the people, they said, please no, this is false. Exercise caution when you review these results. In the one doctor said, I don't think we could suggest that this was a particular therapy that made a difference. Oh, really? I'm sure
You
her
don't
husband
say.
loved every last 11 minute of it.
Man. Yeah, I think people are pretty much trying everything at this point, and
Oh my gosh! And the guy who said and I mentioned that guy last week. Who said, "Hey, gargling Listerine will also kill COVID." But when I saw that was a true one that popped up on my Twitter feed, and I shared it with the boys, and I was like, "You guys have got to see this. This is
well,
the peak of."
this week I'll try it and I'll keep you guys informed. I'll let you
You
know.
gotta let me know how that works out for you. You say, "Hey, honey, we're gonna fight Corona with a little blue
We're gonna
pill."
we're gonna fight COVID with a little bit of love, a little bit of love, pharmaceutical love, but it'll be
God.
love.
Oh my gosh.
Well, before we dip out of here, and I did just want to say, we are a co-host short tonight. Our
Oh
our
yeah.
co-host Travis was busy today, but he will be back per usual,
Yep.
hopefully next Monday.
Yep.
So we will kind of keep the conversation rolling with him on some of these issues, just because I wanted to get his insight on a
Yep.
couple of things.
When we'll
But
probably, like you said, revisit a couple of these next week. So.
yeah, so for all of our listeners, again, before we sign out of here, we just wanted to say thank you. The new year has been going off to a good start for us. Remember, in the next couple of weeks here, we are coming up on our 1 year anniversary for the Voice of Reason
We are
podcast.
6 episodes
And
away.
yes, so we are getting close, and I know that episode we're going to have a ton of special guests on throughout
Yep.
the whole
Yep.
episode and the episodes leading up to that. So we definitely hope you guys tune in and check it out whenever we are back. Be sure that if you guys are listening to the podcast, you like and tell a friend, let a friend know. Hey, I listened to these three idiots talk about some nonsense. If you've got an hour or time on the elliptical, whatever it is you got to do to kill time while you're at work, if you're just chilling, please let them know. They might just give us a listen that day. Tell them they can check us out on YouTube. They can check us out on Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I said YouTube, Facebook. We are on Twitter. We are on Instagram. Voice of Reason Podcast 2021. Be sure to check us out. Although we are rolling into the new year of 2022 for season two. V, you've got anything for the good people before
No,
we
hey,
sign out for the
thank
rest
you.
of the
Hey,
week?
we got one of our first comments off of whoever this was off of. I'll share it with Sean later, but that was actually one of our first comments off of YouTube tonight. So thank you
Nice.
for our YouTube live
Nice.
listeners. We appreciate that. Please, like we said, share the crap out of it. We are gaining subscribers more and more. Getting close to that 400 threshold on Facebook. Crossing thresholds on YouTube. We like that. Still trying to figure out how to stream live to Instagram. We will get that figured out one of these days how that works. So, anyway, thank you guys. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Take us home, Sean.
Hey, and that does it for us here at the Voice of Reason podcast. Again, like I said, like, share, subscribe, comment, be a friend, tell a friend on all of our platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Facebook, YouTube. Anywhere you do your streaming, we are there. Thank you all so much. We cannot wait to talk to you again. Hope you enjoyed this beautiful Martin Luther King Jr. Day. You guys have a great week.
See you guys.